Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you're watching this transmission. It is I, Mike Martins, your housing discussion guru. And what is happening? Well, welcome to Canadian Weekly Housing Wrap-Up and what's happening from Victoria, British Columbia, all the way across to Prince Edward Island. Everyone's being affected by this housing market, and it looks like that Toronto and Vancouver real estate sales are soaring. And this is according to Better Dwelling, too. Better Dwelling calls a spade when they gotta. And a lot of people can't stomach it. A lot of people can't stomach Better Dwelling articles, especially if they bought at the top. So what's going on, guys? This week, top stories. Toronto and Vancouver real estate soar, and borrowing rates are on the decline. Let's find out. Time for your weekly cheat sheet on this week's most important stories. CMHC, Canadian Mortgage Insurance, blah, blah, blah. Toronto real estate, highly vulnerable. Vancouver, stabilizing. Warning signs exist for Canada's real estate markets, but things are improving. The CMHC sees moderate vulnerabilities across Canada. Toronto held its rating of high vulnerability due to the overvaluation of overheating. Vancouver improved, dropping from high to moderate vulnerability. Let's open this up and see what's going on. Canadian, is this the same one? Okay, this is Toronto real estate highly vulnerable, Vancouver stabilizing. Okay. A Canadian real estate bubble? Nah. As more and more three-letter organizations declare Canada's real estate prices unsustainable, Canada's National Housing Agency thinks things are getting better. The Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, CMHC, latest report mentions that the improved fundamentals. The organization even went so far to downgrade the risk of Greater Vancouver. Woo! I might go down there maybe on a day off and just do some videos down there. About the ratings. The ratings are displayed in color-coded scale, not unlike U.S. terror threat advisory scale. Green means there's a low risk. There is a low risk of vulnerability. Let's see what this U.S. terror. Yeah, that's like the old clock they used to have. It's a quarter to 12, 5 to 12, 3 to 12. Not quite direct. The overall assessment rating. A market assessment with high degree of vulnerability means multiple factors have elevated risk. Yellow means recent vulnerability and or persist breach of risk of low levels. Low means everything is fine and housing activity goes. Canadian real estate vulnerability remain moderate overall. So here you go, Canada. Oh wow! So it's this is nice. Wow. There's a degree of vulnerability here on the thing. Source CMHC. So this is good. So let's see what Better Dwelling has to say. Toronto real estate is still highly vulnerable. I was there last week. I was there last week. I don't see anyone running around to buy anything. I see a lot of homes for sale, but I don't see anybody scrambling and bidding wars like it was. The great grand fiesta is gone, man. Someone took the nachos home. It's over. Toronto real estate is highly vulnerable due to the multiple lower-level vulnerabilities. The market is moderately at risk of overheating. Price acceleration and overvaluation. Analysts believe that the overvaluation is easing since prices made a minimal movement because there's an oversupply on the market. There's like this much on the market for sale and this much sold. You got an oversupply in every English-speaking country, major city. You got an oversupply on the market, and they keep saying, like try and sell 30% of what's on the market, then I'll shut my mouth. Vancouver's real estate vulnerability downgraded to moderate. Vancouver real estate vulnerability are subsiding with the risk downgraded in August. Lower home prices and decline in price acceleration were cited as the reason for the drop. The report also expresses few concerns with overbuilding. CMHC analysts aren't concerned since most of the builds have already found buyers. Really? Everyone's walking away from deposits! Montreal real estate vulnerability is low. That's true, because there's bidding wars there right now. And Montreal, Quebec, or whatever, Nova Scotia, Halifax, New Brunswick are the last bastion in Canada where affordability is still kind of within a range, of affordability. Montreal real estate vulnerabilities remain low for a second year. The CMHC believes house prices are moving in line with economic and demographic factors. Resales are beginning to show some signs of overheating. Analysts use the term overheating when sales begin to outpace the number of listings. This overall impression the organization is giving is the market is improving. Okay, it might be improving. Where the hell's that graph Better Dwelling puts up from sales to sales ratio? Okay, let's keep going. Canadian borrowing rates are officially below its last year's levels. Okay, yeah, well, it's gonna because less people are borrowing to have, obviously, to buy, right? Canadians officially now have cheaper access to debt than they did last year. The effective household borrowing fell 3.75% on July 26, dropping 0.27% from just a month before, compared to the same week last year. This decline of 0.79% rates of 24.58% higher than 2016, so there's more resistance than during the peak of credit growth, but the recent declines are the first in 2 years. Canadian mortgage debt makes a huge jump, balance to $3.7 billion. Reverse mortgage debt, so HELOCs, people borrowing, tapping into their homes like ATM machines and using them to hit up a little bit of money here and there, and keeping up with the Joneses, I think, is the number one reason. I don't see why Betty needs to buy that new stainless steel microwave and has to borrow on her house for it. And I don't know why Johnny needs to buy that Tesla. He's got two perfectly fine working cars, but his neighbor down the street, Roy, bought a Tesla. So he's got to show Roy that he can keep up with Roy. Reverse mortgage debt is soaring, and more seniors tap into their home equity. Regular filings show that the balance of reverse mortgage debt hit $3.72 billion in May, up 1.58% from last year. This represents a 27.63% increase compared to last year. The fast-growing segment of debt is boosted, and more seniors opt to stay put instead of downsizing. Canadian homeownership jumps in older, non-university educated demographics. This was an interesting one. The CMHC's latest study shows big jump in the rate of homeownership in 1999. The rate of homeownership stood at 60%, a very high rate by international standards, but in 2016 the number jumped to 62.8, with the largest gap between the age of 55 to 64, which reached 78.4%, StatsCan notes. Almost all of this increase was because of population aging, even that families in older generation groups are more likely to own their homes. Because remember, the boomers got in and bought at the right time, were available to buy at the right time. Wages were kind of on par with what the housing was worth. So they did well. You know, they wanted to live their lives and raise their families. It's not their fault they bought at the right time. They were at the right place and the right time to buy. Toronto real estate sales surge higher but fall short of typical. Again, Toronto real estate's made a huge jump, but still fell short of typical levels. For the month, Tree reported 8,585 sales in July, up 23.47% from last year. It's a huge jump towards typical levels for the month of July, but still 6.09% short of the median 5-year numbers. Big movement back towards normal, but still not quite yet. Woo! Vancouver real estate's rise but falls short of typical, prices slide further. Greater Vancouver real estate sales jumped but didn't help much with price drops. REBGV reported 2,557 sales in July, a jump of 23.11% from last year. Sales still fell short of the typical volume, sales 12% below the 10-year average for the month. That's huge, guys, once you start calculating that and formulating the numbers. 12% below the 10-year average means, oh, but our population's growing. We're having more children. We're bringing in more immigrants. But we're 12% below the 10-year average. Where are these people going? Despite the rise, prices still managed to slide lower than last year, but declines did get smaller. Data suggests Calgary moving towards a more balanced housing market. Yes, it is. That's what's happening on the ground in Calgary, not Edmonton, Calgary. If you think Calgary is a buyer's market, think again. Analysis by Canadian real estate brokerage firm of recent sales and inventory data suggests the city's market is more balanced than it was a year ago. Why? Because you got a lot of British Columbians moving over there and a lot of people from Ontario moving to Calgary. There's quite a bit, actually, that I've spoken to personally. And according to Canadian Real Estate Association, the balance of housing market has a ratio of 40% to 60%. If a percentage is less than 40%, it's a buyer's market. And if it's higher than 60%, it's a seller's market. We went through these graphs many times. Nationally, the ratio was 59%. At the edge of seller's market territory, Calgary came in slightly lower at 56%. Saskatoon was the most buyer-friendly city with 42%, while Montreal was the most seller-friendly at 94%. Because remember, the bidding war is happening right now in Montreal and Quebec. Calgary ranks 7th among 25 cities. Graham says adding the city had a ratio of 49% from the same month last year. It's balanced, but it's becoming more favorable for sellers because new listings starting to decline. Sales did drop 5%, but because new listings fell by a greater percentage, we're seeing a contraction in supply, she says, adding new listings fell by 17%. Despite moving closer to a buyer's market, the average price fell by 6% year over year, just over $450,000. So while buyers still have a lot of choice in the market, they are more likely to start seeing competing bids, particularly on more affordable options yet. So it's always the more affordability product that moves first. So the average detached is around 450 large. I'm pretty sure you could pick up a 2-bedroom for 225 and a 1-bedroom for 160 still. So it's within the average Canadian's income buying range. So there's a lot of people saying, you know, I'd rather take a cut and pay, move to Calgary, but then live my life. CRE, so we got another, so this is Calgary moving towards, and then we have this. CREB report shows stability slowly return to Calgary's market. We got that already. Wow, this Jessica Chan is popular. Look at all of the signs she's got out here. Holy crap. So Newfoundland, we covered Newfoundland in a story earlier today. How tiny homes could provide a path to security for new Canadians. They're trying that in Salt Lake City, Utah. They're trying that in different cities across the U.S. How tiny homes, we don't have the weather that some parts of the states does. I mean, you could pull off a tiny home in South Florida. You got good weather, costs nothing to build. It gets torn down by a hurricane. Oh well, just build it back. No big deal. Every 5-6 years you get hurricanes come through, and then you get 5-6 years of quietness. It would work in other states. Up in Canada, it's just too cold. You got to go below the frost level in some provinces, especially in Nova Scotia. You're going to have to pay, in Newfoundland, you're going to have to pay a fortune in, it's not going to work. New report finds places where minimum wage workers can survive. This is a really important article. This is from right here. Local news, new report finds places where minimum wages can afford housing. And St. John's, a new report finds a few places in Canada where minimum wage workers can afford an apartment, including the St. John's region. Remember, we were talking about 3 weeks ago, before my dad passed away, we were discussing about how in Vancouver and Toronto, people working full-time 40-hour minimum wage cannot afford anything at all, no matter what. Nothing. There's nothing available. New reports finds a new places. So the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives says someone earning minimum wage can afford a 1-bedroom rental in just 9% of the neighborhoods it studied. The number dropped to just 3%, and the person rent a 2-bedroom. Centre says the average wage needed to afford a 1-bedroom in Canada is about $20 an hour. The minimum wage in Newfoundland is $11.40, but the study shows that Metro would have to be earning between $16 and $20 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. The NDP is calling for the government to up the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I don't think the minimum wage raising is just going to be a disaster. Look what's happening right now in California when they raised minimum wage. And where was that? Illinois, I think, too. They raised minimum wage, and that was like an absolute... In New York, too? Oh, man. How tiny homes could provide a path to security for new Canadians? I think this is good, but not in Canada, guys. I'm sorry. South Texas, West Texas, Arizona, drier areas. I could see that working. Yeah, I really can. Tiny homes are more than just a trend. They're triple threat and emerging lifestyle, a potential solution for affordable housing, and possibly a first home for a new immigrant renter. St. John's, about 12,000 households live in unaffordable housing, of which nearly 65% rent. More than 8,900 tenant households require improvement and need more affordability, adequacy, and stability standards. I think it's a great idea. I think it could be successful for particularly first-time buyers, immigrants, millennials, and retirees. Yeah, I see it working, but it won't cost much to heat it. But I just don't think the climate would agree with... You need a little bit more space, I guess, from cracking and foundation cracking and frost levels moving and just a lot of... I don't think it would work. I mean, Hawaii, yeah. Other places, yeah. So 600 square foot homes are the complete with appliances, solid foundation and backyard, sodded lawn, and all for only $90,000, busting the stereotypical image of a house on wheels. Realtor Winnie Lee says tiny homes could be creative solution to downtown St. John's parking woes. It looks nice. I mean, don't get me wrong. If they could get this thing to work, but the cold, look at all the windows. I don't know. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just forming an opinion. I just want to see people live well. Why do people have to downgrade to tiny homes? People collect things through life. Let people die in peace with their stuff, instead of having to allocate and throw everything out, or not even that. Like, just enjoy, raise a family. I mean, anyways. Housing data reveals growing divergence between Eastern and Western Canada. Resales of Canadian homes fell 0.2% in June from the previous month, and the Canadian Real Estate Association said on Monday the first decline reported since home sales plunged in February. The industry group said actual sales, not seasonally adjusted, rose 0.3% from a year earlier because of gains in Greater Toronto and the Montreal, while the group's home price index is 0.3% of June last year. So, we talked about this. We're going to get pockets of areas where you're going to see housing spike up in price because affordability levels are there. Let's say this tiny home thing kicks off and they make 100,000 tiny homes and they sell them for $90,000 a pop. That's going to bring up the average of the benchmark price because, whoa, look at all the sales we made. Look at all the dollars too. But it's not because of that. It's because affordability pockets are making up for the benchmark pricing. Canada's nearly unchanged national tally, CREA, said, was the result of uneven split between number of local markets where the sales rose and fell. Gains were seen in the province of Quebec and southern Ontario, while home sales fell in Greater Vancouver area and Calgary, among others. Hold on. While supply of homes for sales have risen, there's an oversupply in the market, and I don't know why they want to hide this. Well beyond long-term averages, yeah. Oh yeah, there's an oversupply well beyond long-term averages. In the prairie provinces, it remains low because no one's building out there. It's typical long-run level in Ontario and the Maritimes. Newfoundland and Labrador is bucking the trend in Eastern Canada with higher than average inventory of homes on the market. Here we go, guys. Rock and roll. And that's that, guys. What's happening in Canada? It's kind of quiet. But anytime there's a little blip in the market or something of positiveness, a lot of these like CBC and all these other guys, they like to throw it out there and show how, it's coming back. And, they're getting paid to do that, right? Not here on Mike Martin's channel. I get paid nothing to do this. So if you want to support this transmission, go ahead and click on the icon on the P and buy me a coffee once a month. $1 a month helps towards my coffee addiction. and gets some extra change in the pocket to actually keep this transmission going and keeping these computers up to check, and electricity and all this other crap that goes in my 40 hours a week making videos. So yes, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Look forward to reading your comments. Canada for the Great Canadian Weekly Housing Wrap Up.